Alright, hello math fans. Alright, we've been working on problems where the key words here have been simplify. Alright, and remember I told you in the last lesson, simplify meant it could be multiplication, it could be addition, it could be subtraction, but basically you had some sort of parentheses, whether it's multiplication, like I said, addition, whatever, multiplication, and your final answer is no parentheses. So you actually multiplied everything out and distributed and combined like terms, you got a final answer. Now we're actually going the other way, and we're going back to something called factoring. Okay, so simplifying meant going to no parentheses. Now this is our topic, factoring. And factoring means we're going from no parentheses, and now we're going to have parentheses. All right, it's important to understand those words. All right, so what factoring is, it means we're going to kind of break things up a little bit to simplify things. And actually, today's topic is called greatest common factor. And that's abbreviated as GCF. We use this word, those three letters a lot, GCF. Okay? So let me just kind of start out with what a greatest common factor is. It's basically if you see a number that can be multiplied, and I guess the best way to do it is with an example. If I give you 4x plus 8, and my question is, what number goes into 4 and 8 evenly? So what goes into 4 and 8 evenly? Okay, a number. And you're looking for the greatest. That's why it's here, key word here, greatest common factor. So you're telling me the answer to this problem is, or the answer to this question is 4. 4 is the biggest number that goes into 4 and 8. So this is the work I need to see you do. Alright, so let's write 4x plus 8. And if we're saying 4 is our greatest common factor, I'm going to divide each of these terms. And you have to show this work. Divide each of these terms by 4. So this is the deal. Remember I told you we're going from no parentheses to parentheses. So what you're going to do is that 4, this guy right here, that goes on the outside of the parentheses. And the division, 4x divided by 4 is just x. 8 divided by 4 is positive 2. And that, algebra fans, is your answer. 4 parentheses x plus 2. Okay? So we've gone in reverse, because remember the last few lessons, it's, hey, given 4 parentheses x plus 2, simplify. And you would say, oh, 4 times x and 4 times 2. So 4 times x is 4x, 4 times 2 is 8. And that's what we did. But now I'm giving you 4x plus 8, and you are going to give me, you're going to factor to give me 4 parentheses x plus 2. All right? So let's try a couple more here. It's really not difficult. It's just you have to kind of get used to it. So if I had 10x plus 25. Okay, the greatest number, greatest common factor that goes into 10 and 25, so the GCF is 5. 5 goes into 10 and it goes into 25 evenly. Nothing bigger. Alright? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write underneath here, divide each of these by 5. So I get 5, and then 10. It's basically 10 divided by 5 is 2, and then the x, plus 5. 25 over 5 is 5. That's my final answer, math fans. 5 parentheses 2x plus 5. It's really pretty easy. Okay? So that's just with a number. So let's just, let's do a few more terms here. 14x squared plus 21x minus 35. Okay, you got 3 terms. Well, you should recognize what goes into 14, 21, and 35 evenly. Well, 7 does. And that's actually the biggest number that goes into all 3 of those terms. So 7 is my greatest common factor. So I'm going to draw a line underneath each of those terms and write 7, 7, and 7. And my final answer then is 7 parentheses 14 over 7 is 2x squared 21 over 7 is 3x, and 35 over 7 is minus 5. And that's your answer. 7 parentheses 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. Okay? Pretty easy. Okay, let's get, I want to do one that actually causes a little bit of problem here sometimes. Let's do 6x squared minus minus 10x plus 4. All right. You guys should say, well, let's see. 4, no, 4 doesn't go into 6 and 10. 2, yeah. I'll say, and the good thing to know is if it's an even number, if they're all even numbers, that 6, that 10, and that 4, they're all even numbers, I know I can at least take out a 2. All right, so my greatest common factor equals 2. So I'm going to divide each of these by 2, and I get 2 parentheses 3x squared minus 5x plus 2. Okay. Now, actually, I wanted to do a common mistake, and I didn't get to it that problem. But here, this is a common mistake. If I give you let's see, 12x squared minus 16x plus 4. Okay, what is the greatest common factor? It's 4. So you're going to divide each of these by 4. So GCF equals 4. And this is the deal. 4 divided by 4 is 1. It doesn't go away, because sometimes people say, oh, well, a 4 over 4 it just cancels out. Well, a 4 cancels out with as a 1 and a 4 and a 1, so it's 1. And this is the deal. If you have 3 terms, just like this, if you have 3 terms here, when I factor this out, I'm going to have 3 terms inside those parentheses also. So 12x squared over 4 is 3x squared. 16 over 4 is 4. Watch your signs too. And 4 divided by 4 is 1. And that's your final answer. Okay, and it makes sense to have 3 terms inside the parentheses, because if I would actually distribute this to check it, which again, it's the first time I mentioned this, it's really easy to check it. 4 times 3x, 12x squared. 4 times negative 4x, negative 16x, and 4 times 1 is 4. Okay, so you're going to have 3 terms inside the parentheses. Anyway, this was your final answer right here. All right. One thing it's important to do, which we're going to be stressing a lot more about these types of problems, is when I give you guys a problem like negative 6 minus 12x minus 15x squared. Okay, what you need to do is you actually need to put it in descending order first. Now, all the other problems that I've given you have all been nicely in descending order. And you guys remember, descending order just means biggest exponent to smallest exponent. So, this is the deal. Negative 15x squared goes here. Then negative 12x goes there. And then negative 6 goes there. That is in descending order. Alright, so that's actually the first step you're going to do for actually any factoring problem. Alright, you got to put in descending order. Now, another rule here is inside the parentheses, the leading coefficient must be positive. So remember, the leading coefficient is that leading coefficient right there. Okay, that 15. So this is the deal. First of all, you guys should recognize our greatest common factor is going to be 3. All right, greatest common factor is 3. But there's a negative here. So I need to factor out a negative 3. That's important because that value needs to be positive. So watch this. I can divide everything by negative 3. So negative 3 goes on the outside, and then on the inside is positive 5x squared plus 4x plus 2. All right, so if you notice what's going on here now, this is in descending order. And the 5 right there is positive. Okay, you've got to work on that, math fans. Okay, you can't just blow it off and do the problem really fast. You have to put it in descending order first. Then you have to make sure you definitely find your greatest common factor, but you can't have a leading coefficient that's negative. That is really, really important. Okay, so let's start out with another problem here. If I give you 8 minus 12x. This is actually a really simple one. All right, remember the rules. 2 rules so far. All right, and this is, we're going to have a couple more rules as it kind of goes along here with factoring. But the first rule is put it in descending order. So negative 12x plus 8. Second rule is find the GCF. Well, we know it's 4 because 4 goes into 12 and 4 goes into 8. That's the largest, the greatest common factor, but can't have a 12 or a negative there, so we know our greatest common factor is negative 4. So we divide everything by negative 4. So negative 4 times 3x minus 2. There you go. That's our answer. Pretty easy. Okay, let's try another one here. 7 minus 5x squared minus 3x. Alright, so put it in descending order first. So negative 5x squared minus 3x plus 7. Now, there's no number that goes into 5, 3, or 7. So our greatest common factor is really just negative 1 because you can't have a negative in front there. So the greatest common factor equals negative 1. And by the way, math fans, this is always an integer. Okay, it's never going to be, obviously it'll never be 0, but it'll never be a decimal. It's always, greatest common factor is always going to be a number, and we'll get to it in a second here, it could be a variable. So I factor a negative 1 out, which means I divide each of these by negative 1. So negative, and we usually, if it's a 1, you don't put the negative there. Okay, that's just a common rule here, right? And we divide that, we get positive 5x squared, positive 3x, and 7 minus, or divided by negative 1 is negative 7. That's your final answer. Alright? So we're kind of whipping through a few more of these here, just because you need to make sure you know kind of what you're doing here. Let's do this one. 36x minus 28 minus 48x squared. Right, first thing I do, put in descending order, negative 48x squared plus 36x minus 28. And then these are bigger numbers, so, what number goes into 48 and 36 and 28? I think actually 4 is going to be our biggest number. So greatest common factor equals, of course, it's negative, because of that negative right there. And we divide everything by negative 4. So negative 4, parentheses, 3 terms inside here. That gives you positive 12x squared. That gives you negative 9x. And that gives you positive 7. And that's our answer. Okay, so that's how you do greatest common factor with numbers. So I've got one more thing to show you guys. Let's do greatest common factor with variables. This is the deal. You look for the variable with the smallest exponent And that is your greatest common factor just with the variable. You already know how to do it with numbers. So this is the deal. Let me give you an example. If I had x to the fifth minus x cubed. Okay, I look for the variable with the smallest exponent. Well, it's got to be this one right here. So my greatest common factor for the variable is x cubed. It's that simple. So that means I divide each of these by x cubed. So this is, don't forget this on the outside too, because people sometimes forget to write the greatest common factor actually on the outside. So it's x cubed, and then remember it's battle, guys. What's 5 over 3? Isn't it a battle between the x's, and who wins? The north by 2. Okay, x squared. And remember I told you, if it's the same thing over itself, it doesn't just go away, it's minus 1. So that is your final answer. X cubed parentheses x squared minus 1. All right? And again, it's so easy to check it. You multiply x cubed times x squared, you get x to the fifth. And x cubed minus, or times negative 1 is negative x cubed. And you get our original problem that we started with. That's why it's nice to be able to check these if you have extra time. All right, so let's try another one here. X to the seventh minus x to the fifth minus x to the third. Okay, what's our greatest common factor? There we go, x cubed. So we divide each of these by x cubed. And so we put that on the outside of the parentheses, and inside we do battle. The north wins by 4. Do battle here. North wins by 2. Do battle, goes away, and that's our final answer. X cubed parentheses x to the fourth minus x squared minus 1. All right, so let's do one that's a little more complicated. X to the fourth minus x to the seventh minus or plus x to the fifth. Okay, remember, the first thing you're going to do, you put it in descending order. So that's going to be negative x to the seventh plus x to the fifth plus x to the fourth. And then you say your greatest common factor is equal to x to the fourth. That's the smallest one. But, danger, there's a negative here. So it's negative x to the fourth. Okay, because you can't have inside the parentheses a leading coefficient of a negative. So we're going to divide each of these by negative x to the fourth. So on the outside we have negative x to the fourth. Inside the parentheses, obviously becomes positive, and we have a battle, wins by 3. This becomes negative because it's positive divided by negative is negative. We have a battle, wins by 1. And here we have x to the fourth divided by x to the fourth, which is 1, but it's negative 1. And that's your final answer. All right? So let's do a combination of both of them. Both numbers and variables. So if I said, let's see, 9x to the fifth minus 15x cubed plus 6x. So our greatest common factor is equal to, first of all, it's in descending order. Good. Our greatest common factor is, well, 3 goes into 9, 15, and 6. And x to the first power, so or just x. That's our greatest common factor. So we divide each of these by 3x. We have 3x, and then parentheses, 9 divided by 3 is 3. Battle, and we can even put a 1 here if you want to do the battle easier. It wins by 4. 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. Do a battle, you get x squared. And 6 over 3 is plus 2, and the x's cancel. And math fans, this is always going to be a constant if you did it right. Okay, it shouldn't be any variable, because if there's a variable, that means you can take more out and you didn't take the right greatest common factor. So that is your final answer. Alright, so let's just do another example right over here. Let's see. negative 4x to the third minus 10x to the fifth plus 6x squared. So this is a little more complicated because we have numbers and variables. But the first thing you do, remember, put it in descending order. I cannot stress it enough. It's got to be in descending order. So it's going to be negative 10x to the fifth minus 4x cubed plus 6x squared. It's got to be in descending order. All right, and then what I'm going to do is, you recognize you got a negative here, so I know I'm going to part of my greatest common factor is going to be negative. Well, 2 goes into everything, and that's my smallest exponent, so 2x squared. So you can divide everything by negative 2x squared. And you get 5x to the third. Oops, I didn't put the number in front, so it's negative 2x squared. 5x cubed plus 2x minus 3. And that is your answer. Notice this is in descending order. This one's positive. And don't forget to put that on the outside of the parenthesis. All right. Let's do 2 more here because I want to do one with multiple variables too. All right. Let's see. How about negative 10x plus 25x to the fourth minus 15x to the seventh. Okay, and finally, or fact. That's the directions will say factor here, guys. All right, those are the directions. So what we're going to do is put it in descending order. Negative 15x to the seventh plus 25x to the fourth minus 10x. So my greatest common factor is equal to, definitely, it's negative. 15, 25, and 10, you should recognize those are all multiples of 5. So 5 is my number. And then what's the smallest exponent? It's just x. So I divide everything by negative 5x, negative 5x, negative 5x. So I have negative 5x in parentheses, and then negative over negative is a positive, so it's 3x to the sixth. Because remember, you're doing battle with x to the 1. The next one is going to be minus 5x to the third, and then plus 2. And that's your final answer. Okay? You can do one more problem, promise, that has 2 variables in it. So if I give you guys, let's do 12x to the fifth y squared minus 18x to the eighth y to the third plus 36x to the fourth y to the fourth. Now some of you guys are going, whoa, wait a second here. We've got 2 variables, and how do I know it's in descending order or not in descending order? Well, this is the deal. The degree of this, remember we learned that this is 5th degree for x to the 5th, and this is 2nd degree. If I add these together, I get 7. That's the degree of that term. I add these together, I get 11. That's the degree of that term. And I add those together, and I get 8, and that's the degree of that term. Okay, so you add those together because it's multiplied. All right, so you add those exponents. But we're not combining them together, but that's just to figure out the degree of each of these. Okay, so let's put it in descending order. 11 goes first, so it's negative 18x to the 8th, y to the 3rd. The next one is the 36, so it's plus 36x to the 4th, y to the 4th. And then plus 12x to the 5th, y squared. So that is now in descending order. Now you got to find your greatest common factor. Well, guess what? It's definitely going to be negative. What goes in 18, 36, and 12? 6 does. And then what I want to do is I want to find the smallest exponent for the x. That's x to the 4th. And then the smallest exponent for the y. That's y squared. There we go. And the deal is, if you pick the wrong letters here, if I pick something too big, then you get the bottom would win. The south would win when you did battle. All right, that's just kind of the way you know it. And if I picked something too small, then every term would have an x or every term would have a y, and that's not correct. That means you didn't pull enough out. All right, so my last step here is divide each of these by negative 6x to the 4th y squared. This was the hardest one. You're not going to get them all this bad, but you got to know how to do this. So this one, we're going to write negative 6x to the 4th y squared. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to have 3 terms. Don't forget. So that's going to give us 3. If I do battle, I get x to the 4th y, right? 3 over 2, or 3 versus 2, you get 1 left over, minus 6. The x's cancel, and we get y squared. And then minus 2, you get the north wins by 1, and the y's cancel. So that is my answer. Looks a little complicated, but as long as you follow all the same rules with factoring things out, putting descending order, greatest common factor, you'll be good to go. All right? That's it. That's greatest common factor. That is probably the most important part of factoring that you will need to know. So make sure you know how to do that. All right, math fans? That's it. And have a good day. Bye-bye.